Travis Wayne Goodzo. So this part of the Book of Mormon is the porn section, because it's talking about sex. And so there's discussions in here about seed. In chapter 6, Nephi is taking a break to let us know that he's encouraging future Mormons to come unto their future Christ of the latter days. Me, if you hadn't been catching on to the series, which I've put the series playlist on the home page so it'll be easier to find. I doubt it'll help, but just so you know. And so he talks about, wherefore I shall give commandment unto my seed. And he doesn't say offspring, because technically he only has sperm. He only has the seed. You have to have a woman who has egg to produce offspring. That is called sexual reproduction. That's a science thing. It's not a feeling thing or a spiritual witness. It is science. Science is therefore designated it as such because humans are incapable of asexual reproduction or any kind of other sexual reproduction other than sexual reproduction. Sperm, egg, baby. That's it. That's all. Even test tube babies still follow that same exact process. It's just they scoop out the eggs of a woman and freeze them, get a man to masturbate, freeze it. Then when they want to run tests or do in vitro fertilization or test tubes, they still have to take egg, sperm, combine them together to try to produce the baby. Same exact process. There is no other process to produce human offspring. Despite psychologists trying to fool people into believing otherwise. And so it's necessary to understand why they're going through this in the Book of Mormon. So let's take you to Matthew to help illustrate this point. The beginning of Matthew, the book of the generation, gen, the root word of gender, which is another language word for sex. And so genealogy is the line of sexual offspring. Sperm, egg, baby. That produces a genealogy line. And so generation of Jesus Christ. Thus, sperm, egg, Jesus. Okay? Christians are like, what? No, immaculate, Holy Ghost. No sperm. No, virgin. Yeah. No duh. And so here's a whole list of seed with an occasional reference to a woman. And they're doing it on purpose with the number 14 for gematria in Jewish Kabbalah purposes. But then we get to verse 18. Now the birth of Jesus is on this wise, even though we just told you it's supposed to be sperm, egg, baby descent. Guess who they end with? Verse 16. And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who was called Christ. So Christians will have to give up that Mary was immaculately conceived, but wait a minute, it's not Joseph who's the seed, because we find that then Joseph, her husband, oh wait a minute, no, it's verse 18, when as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, before he bought her at the temple of the Greeks, with Romans technically, she was found with child of the sperm of the Holy Ghost. That naughty Holy Ghost. The Book of Mormon has a different take on it if you take it as literal history. Yep, here you have child bride incest. Book of Mormon is not literal history, it's the learning of the Jews. And so yes, it's Father Amen, who's a human being. Cut it out, Mormons. And so yeah, there's a problem here because it's not Joseph's son. Joseph is the descendant of King David, the birthright blessing bloodline. So now we got to go to Jacob, where Nelson humiliated himself at the pulpit of conference. Claimed he knew all about the gathering. Oops, you missed something very crucial. Seed. And so yeah, Esau was born first. Jacob usurped the birthright and blessing as he was holding on to the ankle coming out of the womb, and thus was named the usurper, because it was prophesied by the author who knew the end before the beginning, because it's a prophecy that Jacob usurped the birthright and blessing of Esau. And they go through the Egyptian battle scenes, contests between Horus and his uncle Set, rather than brothers. It's Osiris and Set who were brothers. But different cultures tell it in different ways, in their language, and in a different story form. It's all coming from the same origin, for the same prophecy. And so Jacob now is the bloodline for Joseph, who is the Christ of Genesis. Esau loses the birthright blessing, so his seed, even though he names his firstborn son Ra, the Egyptian son, not necessarily noonday as Amen is. Amen is specifically the noonday son. Ra is the general son of the Egyptians, that from morning till night, even in the underworld, is always Ra. It's the general word for sun. And so when it's then merged with Amen, becomes Amen Ra. That's now what's going on here, is they're combining the two together as one. But that's David Moses dynasty with the Amen priesthood, by the way. 18th dynasty Egyptian pharaohs. I've done that in other videos for you. But yeah, even the Egyptians understood seed. Male seed, sperm, to give birth to the future king, future Christ, to take over the throne. And so the concept of a usurper is part of the prophecy. Joseph Smith, as the bloodline of Joseph Smith Sr., he being of the York Rites Freemasonry with the Knights Templar, the Holy Grail, the bloodline, assigned his son to be the Christ of Mormonism. But they knew the enemy would figure it out, infiltrate, usurp, murder, and change him to Christian Jesus. And so, in preparation for this, Hiram was also a prophet, seer, revelator, and patriarch, so that his descendant would be the Christ of the latter days, and get that missing translator gift as well. And so, yeah, that's why it was necessary for Hiram's wife and son, Joseph Fielding Smith Sr., to go with Heber to the valley so that the prophecy could be fulfilled. Because none of the other Smith women went with Brigham Young, only Hiram's wife. Of the main family, anyway. There's George Albert Smith, who was like an uncle or something like that to the Smith parents. George Albert Smith. And then his son or grandson was one of the presidents of the church. Have to be second or grandson or something like that. Can't remember. But not of the main Smith line. And so clueless on what the main family was doing. And there are indicators that even William Smith did not know, he being too young when they started the church. And his actions after Joseph Smith died, his two brothers died, seemed to indicate that he too was not fully understanding what it was that they were doing the church for. As Joseph Smith's son, Joseph Smith III, likewise, knew nothing of it either, and thus named the church wrong. The Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's because he assumed Brigham Young claimed to be the authoritative successor, and therefore he went to check out on how Brigham Young was running the church, and then came back and organized his own. Which I think Brigham was still alive when he went to the valley to scope things out, but doesn't matter. But yeah, it's all about seed, people. The learning of the Jews is that the Christ is human, not real, as Constantine defined it within the text of the creed itself when he gave the new name for the nature and character, homoousion. He made it up. It does not exist. But he defines his brand new word with not real. It's right there in the creed. All Christians can read it and know. Catholics have to memorize it. They know. And yet, similar to Mormons, all Mormons know the Book of Mormon says it's in the learning of the Jews, so that when you get to the name Jesus, guess what? It's not real. It's the Christ Emmanuel. So the book of Matthew clarifies this for us, even though it's been screwed up by Christianity, that even though he's using the name Jesus for the Christ. He's referring to Emmanuel instead, the prophecy of the Jews of Emmanuel of the latter days. Me, Sun God, God Soul. And I think I forgot to put God Soul on the third video. I think I put it on the first two. It's easy to forget. I'm not in the habit. And so, yeah, the whole thing about a virgin, it's Virgo. This is outer space. It's a sign in the heavens of the start of the ministry. And so what happens in chapter 2? We have other signs in the heavens. The 3 stars of Orion come to the king, Herod, and say, hey, we saw the sign in the heavens, Sirius, that is pointed to by the 3 stars of Orion, so we've come to worship them. So yeah, they're mixing dates with this whole birth thing. And then, boom, chapter 3, there's Joseph Smith as John the Baptist, the forerunner who sets up the way for the Christ. So yes, it wasn't John the Baptist who actually came to Joseph Smith as literal history or the new epic that the church is changing it to at the last year of the latter days. But they're referring to Isaiah. Voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make his path straight. And the same John had his raiment of camel's hair and leathern girdle about his loins. The manufacturing of seed, and his meat was locusts and wild honey. Yes, Mormon locusts. That always baffled me. They complain about the locusts, so Mormons pray for seagulls. What are you thinking? You had food. Now you have seagulls and wild honey. Emmanuel is prophesied to have butter and honey, to eat butter and honey. And in our day and age, that's understood as any milk product from a cow. So yes, cheese and yogurt, yes, I do like those, and I have lived on those as well. Grew up in a family that could afford those. And honey, yeah, that's a sweetener. Just like sugar. Yes, big time into sugar. Prophecy fulfilled. This is a little side thing there. Wasn't sure if I was ever going to get to it if we got to the chapters of Isaiah that talked about it in the Book of Mormon. And so that's what Nephi is using seed for here. To remind the reader who would be Mormon in the future time that you're supposed to be looking for a human male. In section 103, verse 16, yeah, he's going to be a Mormon. The Christ is a Mormon, a human. From parents, seed, egg, baby. And you're supposed to remember from the sacrament that this is the process for which it will happen. Because you have males and females as couples who have babies going to church in likeness of the gathering of the latter days to Zion, and there partake of the broken bread and the blood-red wine of Osiris, who was murdered by his brother Satan, and through whom his seed, Horus, would restore the throne of Joseph Smith. And so that's what you're supposed to be thinking of during the sacrament as 12-year-old boys are passing it out. Technically not girls, but Joseph Smith said that women could hold the office of deacon and teacher, and thus could pass the sacrament. And so Joseph Smith understood the broader range that it requires both a man's seed and a woman's egg to produce the offspring. And so it shouldn't matter if women are passing the sacrament or men are passing the sacrament or mixed together, because it's the concept of men and women producing offspring for the future Christ who would come and save Mormons from the great and abominable church. And in Exodus to Zion. Okay? So that's what he's writing about here. So then 7. Yeah. You got to get those eggs. So it's egg collecting time. Lehi's sons are now ordered to go back to Jerusalem, to Utah, to get Garna and others who are single, so that they can have babies. And so, yeah, it's just a coincidence that the 4 sons now of Lehi plus Zoram is a perfect match for Ishmael and his 5 daughters. Which apparently he's also had other kids, but they've gotten married off. And so they too come along. And so it is kind of weird, because Jacob gives his sermon as a grown adult, where he's referring back to the law of his father not to practice polygamy. And apparently the Nephites were practicing polygamy. There's no way that they could have had sufficient. It's weird. Because trying to figure out the math, they couldn't have had more than 200 new offspring by that point. And yet you're still looking at a very young age when they're pairing up to have their own kids, and it's but again, it's not literal history. Problem solved. They threw that, Joseph Smith Sr. threw that in to enforce no polygamy. And Joseph Smith Jr. likewise enforced no polygamy. His 1835 Doctrine and Covenants had a whole chapter on monogamy. No polygamy. And yet, there were some usurpers who infiltrated the church, who were secretly practicing polygamy, who would go on to frame Joseph Smith and usurp his church and have him murdered, and then claim that he was a polygamist, with forging of documents, sealing ceremonies, etc. And so, yeah, Laman and Lemuel don't complain here. The one and only time they don't complain. Awesome. See the power of a woman? One good woman. I should make that the theme song in the description below rather than the continuous September that I've been putting in. One good woman. Okay. It has been said, it has been written, so it will be done. And so, oh yeah, they go right into the, yeah, that's right. Nephi is being a buzzkill. Because Laman and Lemuel, being the bad boys that they are, were pairing up with the girls of Ishmael who, encouraged the bad boy behavior of Laman and Lemuel. And so Nephi is trying to say abstinence only. And so he gets tied up and left for dead. And so he's freed by the magical power of faith without works. So, yeah. See, there will be problems with the Exodus. I'm already dreading. Scenario number one, I'm it. However, I did get some hearts and some bouquets of flower emojis from a subscriber. Apparently, she's a holly homemaker, I believe is the term that we call such women in Mormonism. And I'm okay with that. Like I told you in the last one, fashion plates, all about women's clothing design, fashion design. And so I don't know her. She never comments other than TY for thank you, with a regular 1 heart. But yeah, in the video number 3 today, I got bouquets of flowers and hearts. So I have no idea where she is in the world. I have no idea if she's legitimate or if she's a bot. I have no clue, other than I've been to her channel. I see that she's interested in playlists that deal with women's fashion and such, crafts and stuff like that. And so, yeah, you need to understand that there will be a temporary period of time, depending on how long it lasts, where the knowledge of making clothing is going to be extremely helpful. If you've seen the Will Smith movie of the virus that he caused, that turned the city into zombies, and then prophesied of the Batman Superman movie, he had to go house to house to look for survival items, and thus bring his weapon as well to protect him from the zombies, the Armageddon zombies who've risen from the grave, resurrected as zombies. And so, yeah, like I told you at the end of the last video, is the more people we can get, the better we can form a society that will prosper. And the more variety that can be added to Zion. And so people who know how to grow food, who know how to make clothing, who know how to build homes, who know how to do electrical work, who know how to do plumbing and irrigation and stuff like that, all of that would be helpful, rather than leaving it all up to me. to tell everybody how to build a boat when nobody else knows how. Which we get to. So yeah, I'm kind of worried as to what's going to happen, because if we end up with an uneven number of males to females, how are we going to handle that? Who gets the extra woman? Or will a man be left out because there's too many men? You know, those kinds of things worry me. And it especially worries me if there are no men at all and it's just all women. Do I dare mention it? Can people handle it? There are scientific terms for groups of specific species of animals. So herd, flock, pride, etc. When it comes to humans, a group of men are trouble. Here comes a trouble of men. Wait, we're not done yet. Please be kind. It's just for fun. A group of women are hell. If you do not understand, you've never been a man. And so, yeah, it's a hell of women. Because, yeah, as much as women think that it's a man's paradise to have him be the only man, like I was in my interior design class at Rick's, because I was the only man, all the women stayed away from me. I could not get anywhere with any of them because I was the only man. Hell. See? And so, and especially if I'm the last man on earth and they want nothing to do with me, frustrating. And so, yeah, this is kind of unrealistic that it's going to be a perfect match. And so I'm not sure what the outcome will be. But we have to remember that there are Mormons outside of the United States who, when they get the call, will be coming to Southern Illinois to join us. Right? And so there's more opportunities for everything to even out, but I still worry, because what do you do if there's one who gets left out? What happens? If it's one extra woman, do you make an exception for polygamy in that one case? Or if there's a whole bunch of extra women? Or if there's a whole bunch of extra men, do they just, sorry, no sex for you? And how are they going to handle it, being the ones not chosen to be paired up with a woman? Because then you'd have to say it would have to be up to the women to choose the men, so that the men can then feel more humiliated and disgraced, rather than angry and upset that they were framed and left out. I do not look forward to this one thing, even though Laman and Lemuel were the only ones not complaining at this point. And so, yeah, it starts off then we get to chapter 8. After they make it back all in one piece, Nephi is not dead yet. And so, then boom, chapter 8, It came to pass we had gathered together all manner of seeds of every kind, both of grain of every kind and also seeds of fruit of every kind. Continuing that pattern to reinforce the need for posterity, not only to fulfill the prophecy of the bloodline Christ, but also for the human race. That's how it's done. And so then he then prophesies of his seed. He sees that Nephi and Sam will have many of their seed that will be saved in Zion. But Laman and Lemuel will remain in the dark and dreary wilderness of the desert of Utah. Because they ain't coming to Zion. If they come, they will be declaring war against us. Because their only intention is to destroy Zion. So when they are rejected, and they refuse to be rejected and refuse to go back, they will be declaring war. So why are they bothering to come with us if they don't want to come? Their only intention of coming is to destroy and to rule, which is exactly what Laman and Lemuel did. They didn't want to go. They wanted to stay behind. And so they went, and as the birthright blessing son, even though he lost it, he assumed that he was going to take over Nephi and murder him to do it. Just as Brigham did with Joseph Smith. And so, yeah, we'll have to face that scenario. Who can we trust among Mormons? Who would be joining to sabotage us? And there are prophecies about saboteurs of Zion who will try to ruin it for everybody. I know who they are already because they're letting themselves be known on my YouTube comments. They just won't leave me alone to have free or religious freedom. They have to impose themselves in my channel to let it be known that they disapprove and that they will hurt me if they get an opportunity to do so. Okay. And so then, yeah, 9 is the 2 sets of records, so we can include that here as well. The larger plates is for the main history, which I've got the files for. They just need to be organized and put together. And then the smaller ones are the rituals for the religious practice. Already got that also. Just needs to be organized and such forth and forever. So I've got the brass plates, which are from the Egyptian documents. Just need to have them organized. And so, yeah, there's lots of things for me to do in Zion or in the cave, which could be the other scenario. Nobody goes. Everybody gets destroyed. But it's not just the record of Mormons. It's the record of the United States. It's the record of the world from the beginning of its creation to the prophecies of the future. I've been working on collecting all of it. And then 10, yeah, that's the next video, which may not be today, but that would be the next in line, because it's Lehi predicts the Babylonian captivity. Really? It already happened. You left already in that year when they were already marching in. It already happened. And then it tells of the coming among the Jews, no, among the Mormons, Bruce, of a Messiah. Yeah. And so, 8 April 2024, death and resurrection. That's what it's all about. Giving us the date here in this chapter. So I'm doing what's coming up on the next episode rather than ending.